to this roundtable from the Salmon Eye. I'm very proud that on the actual day of the Unveil, we are able to invite to a high-level discussion like we will be having for the next hour. With the main topic of how we can better feed the planet and make positive changes to our food systems. I want to start by briefly introducing what Salmon Eye is. Salmon Eye is a center that is built to inspire and inform people on how we can better feed the planet with sustainable seafood. 71% of Earth's surface is covered by bodies of water, but only 2% of the per capita calorie consumption originates from the sea. UN estimates that we will need to produce 56% more food to feed 10 billion people in 2050, and this is why lowering carbon emissions by 67%. So we want people to feel enthusiastic and empowered about how they can contribute positively, and in addition showcase the best practices, share knowledge and share technologies on how we can improve how we feed the planet. So I'm looking forward to what we have in front of us and would like to introduce one of the main architects behind the Paris Agreement, co-founder of Global Optimism, and today's keynote speaker and master of ceremony, Tom Rivett-Carnac.
Thank you, Sebastian. So wonderful to be here with you all and excited to be having this dialogue over the course of the next hour on the future of how we get more of our food from the ocean and do it in a sustainable way. I'm going to start off by just giving a few words of context of the moment that we're in and the importance of that and the role that we can all play in the room here in order to meet that challenge. This is a complicated moment that we're living in. Yesterday I was walking through North London on my way to the plane that would bring me here, and I passed the house where Charles Dickens lived and wrote many of his most famous books. And in particular, he wrote the book A Tale of Two Cities that begins with the line, to my mind, that is the most profound in literature. He says, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Now, Dickens, of course, was describing the horrors and triumphs of the French Revolution, but he could just as well have been describing this moment that we're living through. This is the most decisive decade in the history of humanity. And it sounds like an exaggeration to say that, but it's really not. Whether we have tropical glaciers or coral reefs or remotely recognizable ecosystems in fjords like this, in 30 years, 300 years, or 300,000 years is dependent on what we do in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, if you're like many people, when you hear that, you have a small internal recoil. What's going to happen? Are we going to make it? What's going to happen to me and my family? And that's a very natural part of being alive at this moment for us, but particularly for young people. A recent study showed that in the OECD countries, children between the age of young people between the age of 16 and 23, 42% spend multiple hours on a daily basis worrying about climate change, and more than 50% think humanity is doomed in the short term. And we can't look them in the eyes and tell them it's going to be okay. We have left this so late that we now need to reduce emissions by 8% every year. That is in excess of anything humanity has come together and done before. And what happens if we don't do that? We risk triggering these really quite alarming feedback loops in the system. And I think we all know how this works now. The white Arctic ice melts further and reveals the dark water underneath. That absorbs more heat and the ice melts more quickly. The Arctic tundra melts more quickly and releases the methane trapped underneath it, and that releases more warming on the planet. So as a result of that, it's better for us to start off by thinking of this. Climate change is less like sitting in a bath of slowly warming water and more like being trapped in a cage with a wild animal that happens to be sleeping at this moment. Us warming the climate is us working out how hard we're going to kick the animal. And if we kick it hard enough, it wakes up, and it doesn't really matter what we do after that. So that's the context we're facing. It's not fun, it's not easy, but it's better that we have a realistic assessment of it. And sitting here, I would also say, I've been involved in climate change for 25 years. I feel more optimistic, I feel more hopeful that we are now on the cusp of a profound breakthrough that is going to lead to solutions to many of these systemic problems. And why is that the case? Well, for me, that goes back to the story of how the Paris Agreement came about in 2015, one of the things I was most closely associated with. One of our real problems on the road to Paris was this abdication of responsibility between different players in society. So government for years would say to business, we can't do anything about climate change. Most of the emissions come from business. We need business to lead and innovate and invest, and then we'll be able to do something and create solutions to the problem. But business would say, government sets the rules. They set the rules of the road and we operate within them. We can't lead on this. If you want us to do something, you have to lead. Now, the world changes mysteriously and slowly, but there are always these moments of departure where the future looks different from the past. And for me, one of those moments came in 2013. We were at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we're having a conversation with a group of CEOs and national leaders about this issue. And my friend and colleague, Christiana Figueres, was there and challenged them to say, we need to get past this moment. And it was a remarkable moment. It ended up with CEOs leaving the room saying, we will be net zero by 2050, actually solving the problem, and we'll do it collaboratively with governments around the world. That started a chain event. The following morning, we had 10 signatories to that. 3 weeks later, we had 100. And that worked its way into a wave of momentum that ultimately crashed over us and delivered the Paris Agreement more effectively than we could have imagined. It started with that courage and that determination to actually solve the problem. And as that dynamic continued, we saw more and more ambition build and build to the point now where, if fully implemented, all the commitments that are out there, we'll be heading for something like 2.4 degrees of warming. Now, that's not good enough, right? But if you consider that before Paris it was 7, after Paris it was 4, now it's 2.4, if we're able to continue the momentum of that positive interaction between government and business, then we can get to where we need to go. So why do I tell you this story? Well, it's relevant to what we're doing here today in this remarkable place. First of all, I would say that relates to fossil fuel usage largely. And that's 2/3 of the problem, but 1/3 is where our food comes from. There was a recent report from Oxford University that demonstrated that the food system alone, going forward a few decades, is enough to break through our climate targets, even if fossil fuel use was reduced to 0 tomorrow. We can't do this unless we deal with the food system. And as everybody who's here knows, aquaculture and the production of protein farmed in the ocean is probably the most carbon effective way that we can provide protein for the future. There's no possibility that we can reduce this. We need to scale it up and teach the world how to do it. But that's a complicated point, right? Aquaculture has this enormous global benefit and possibility, but it also represents local environmental impacts. And we know that. Things like lice, things like local pollution, things like utilizing wild catch to feed farmed salmon. But the good news is that these issues are entirely resolvable, both with technology, but also with that partnership between business and government racing to the top and continuing to challenge each other. That's what I really hope for from today. This remarkable place, this incredible investment, this legacy of the narrative that if you're bold, then you can do it, is that we bring different players together to actually say we are going to solve these challenges and do it here in Norway, right? Norway is a country that has benefited enormously from the fossil fuel economy. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's something we should applaud. The good governance of this country has made it prosperous. But the question is, what do we do now with those resources? And I would argue that investing them and doubling down to actually deliver a process by which we can feed the future with sustainable protein from the sea is an amazing legacy for that. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm now very excited to go into a dialogue. And I'd like to start with you, Minister, if that's all right. So Minister Bjørnar Skjæran, Minister of Fisheries. I'd like to just kick off by asking you, Norway is clearly a leader in maritime food production and a big exporter to the world. Can you just dive a bit more into the plans from the Norwegian government and explain how you want to facilitate policies and increase sustainable seafood production while we keep the oceans clean and preserve the environment?
Yeah, thank you. You know, the health of the ocean is obvious. It's a global issue, and Norway wants to create increased international understanding of the connection between the ocean's economic importance and the ocean's environmental condition. Last autumn, Prime Minister Støre took over the leadership of the international high-level panel, what we call the ocean panel, which was established by the former Prime Minister Solberg in 2018. And the sea panel countries have committed to sustainably manage 100% of their national sea areas by 2025. Achieving this ambitious goal will I think, require considerable effort, both nationally and internationally, but it is also only the start of it. We also know that the export of seafood have continued to grow, even when the world has been through some major issues, making business all over somewhat dormant. And this year, with many global markets in turmoil and more unpredictable food supply situation, we are still setting new records. The increase of export says something about the trust that the world has in Norway as a reliable supplier, and what a seafood powerhouse little Norway has become. And to keep up the good work, we must manage and we must utilize the resources from the sea in a sustainable way, more and more sustainable every year to come. And I think that our ability to protect the ocean is the key factor for us to be able to talk about the ocean as a big part of a sustainable future. I also think that Norway can promote our knowledge-based approach from healthy oceans to healthy populations to ensure sustainable aquatic food systems. We can do this both in the follow-up of both the ocean panel and the food system summit, and this can provide increased visibility and momentum in many contexts. So first thing, the sea must be protected, but we also have to use the ocean. And it's about water quality, species diversity, ecosystems in balance, and when they are working with the sea, fisheries and aquaculture, there is often talk of financial earnings or environmental burden. But by increasing awareness of the contribution to food security, we can increase awareness of what is needed to safeguard the ocean as a food container, so that ocean can provide us with enough food, safe, healthy foods for generation to come, and we will be able, I'm sure we will be able in years to come to cut more emissions, and maybe in not so many years the Norwegian seafood sector will be net zero. I cannot today say what year, and we haven't said public that this is the goal. In that year, we have said 50%.
If you want to announce it now, feel
no,
free.
we have no, but this has to be knowledge based, and we have said 50% until 2030.
Yeah.
That's the goal now. But I'm not afraid of talking about this industry as an industry who will be in front when it comes to cutting emissions.
That's fantastic, and that's amazing to hear that commitment will come. I think that's so important. I found one very quick follow up, and then we're going to pass on. You said at the beginning that you were talking about balancing environmental importance and economic importance and environmental integrity. I would argue that those are the same thing. You don't have economic importance without environmental integrity. Would you say that's the case?
You're of course you're right, but often in the public debate,
yes, it feels like,
and maybe I could have spoken more clearly about that, but I'm sure that if we shall succeed, you have to go for sustainability both in economic, in environmental and social.
Right, but the economic is a subset of the environmental, right? Yeah. Thank you so much, Minister. So I'm going to turn now to Frank Bakke-Jensen, the Director of Fisheries, and thank you so much for being here. I'd love to ask, how can Norwegian authorities assure that new technology and sustainable solutions will be implemented in the farming industry as quickly as possible?
Well, just let me start with. I think one of the most important gift Norway can give to the world's population is the knowledge of how to, in a sustainable way, harvest or produce food from the sea. Simple as that. There's no other countries with the knowledge, the resources, the money, technology, and development and history who could do it. We can, and we have some experience in it. And an important part of this knowledge would be good management. And we are not that many, but we are brave enough to speak about the Norwegian model of managing this. And the Norwegian model for managing the aquaculture industry is in a coordinated way. The authorities have the overall coordination, and we then work on the cooperation between 3 parties. We have the administrators, their agencies, we have skilled researchers, knowledge institutions in this triangle, and we have the farmers and their organizations. And connecting these, we've done it in several fields in Norway. This helps to create good management. Then we also always need to develop technology, and both the fish farming acts and the older fish farming acts, but also the current aquaculture act, are technology neutral. We leave it to the farmers to choose which technology, but we still rather strict claims on the results using the technology, and that has been successful to have an act which is technology neutral, and then you gain the creativity and the entrepreneurship and everything in the industry. We have been good, and then the concept of sustainability was included in the Norwegian Farming Act definition of purpose as early as 1990. And it's important to link this. We have the national framework, but we need to link it to the UN Sustainable Development Goal 14, for example, and to continue to benchmark it with international law. We also can communicate it, and this is the good link to offer the gift we can give to the people, how to harvest or produce food from the sea in the most sustainable way after international standards. So that's a task, and here we are.
I love that vision of Norway providing this model of how we can get food from the sea. Can I just ask, I love also what you just said about setting the goal but being technology neutral to facilitate innovation. Of course, you have to keep strengthening the targets there to facilitate more innovation. Do you think the targets are right at the moment?
Well, the targets have to be. I've been the Minister of Defense. I know a lot about moving targets.
Right.
This is a moving target.
Right.
This is a moving target, but we need to be strict, and we need to work with the knowledge coming on all the way to point that. And yes, I think we are good.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And last week we put a new system for regulations where we strengthen this.
Very good. Okay.
So we do it all.
Yeah. So Geir Lasse Taranger, can I pass over to you, please? Director of Science Institute at Marine Research. Can I ask you, please, around how can more transparency in the seafood industry help innovation and new technologies to grow?
Yeah, I think, and it's fantastic to be in this place today. And it's not only a beautiful fjord and location, but it's also more or less epicenter of aquaculture. And on the one hand, I fully agree that aquaculture is the future, and also that the knowledge and the technology and the management systems that have been developed in Norway can inspire other countries to develop their industry. But on the other hand, also in this region, we see some of the environmental impacts that needs to be improved in order for the industry to grow. And I think that's also the idea with this center, is actually to, on the one hand, to speak openly and truly about all the challenges that we have in order to scale up aquaculture. Because I think we see here in the west coast of Norway that in order to further develop the industry, we need to tackle these problems. And on the one hand, you know, the salmon farming in Norway is mainly in these open cages, and hence everything that's happening in the coastal water is affecting the salmon, and everything that comes out from the salmon goes into the sea, affecting the wild salmon needs and so forth. And I think having this kind of platform to actually be to speak truly about these issues and finding solutions. And I think, for example, in this region, we may have to employ new technologies if we want to have an increase. For example, there are some initiatives here to have so-called semi-closed cages that can kind of tackle some of the problems we have with the sea lice, at least for a part of the production. So I think what also was mentioned here by Bjørnar, that more strict regulation is also a driver for innovation. And I think that's certainly needed in this part of Norway. But given that, if we can fix those problems, it's fully truly said that this is a climate-friendly food production. We need to develop it. It is challenging, but then we have to be also very open about the problems, solve them, and move ahead.
Yeah. I'd love to ask you the same follow-up question, if I may, because you come in from a different perspective, which is so interesting. So, do you think the regulations are sufficiently strict to facilitate the innovation that you want to see?
Well, we have just been having a big trial in court here in Norway on the regulation system, and luckily, from my perspective, the regulations stand up in court. Okay. So yeah, so it's disputed and it's tough, but I think that's needed in order to develop things further. And I think this venue is made for having those kind of discussions, so we get to the facts and move on.
Fantastic, thank you. Great, moving on, Geir Helge Jonsson. If I can turn to you, I'd love to ask, what actions now do you feel should be taken to improve the water quality that we're currently seeing?
I'm a CEO at a consultant company, Rådgivende biologer, advising biologists, and we have been responsible for the monitoring of the environmental impact from Eide, Fjordbruk the last 20 years, and also lots of other companies. And the nutrients and the organic matter released into the fjords is no longer a big problem. We have good recipients, and the fjords are nutrients, low in nutrients. Even we have the most dense aquaculture area in the world around us today. We have been monitoring the effects on the sea lice on wild populations of salmons and sea trout. And this is a problem today. This is the system that Geir Lasse talked about that are now limiting the production, are reducing the production in this farm because the environmental effects are too high. Or semi-closed or closed farms will be a way to go. But we also see that the land-based farms are now popping up. We are assisting the companies with applications for such farms. And this fish farm we have floating just behind here today produce a few thousand tons of fish annually. The fish farms on land we have done applications for shall produce 30, 40, 50 and 100,000 tons of fish each year. And then we have a huge problem with the effluents into the recipient because these are much, much bigger, and you have a pipeline, and in the end you have the release of these substances. And then you have treatment plants for cleaning plants for the effluents, which are not very efficient today. And that is also another problem today, that we have a regulation that says that we should possibly manage to catch up with 60% of the particles in the effluents. But no one of these existing companies managed to do that. So we have a large problem to design these treatment plants for the outlet from these really big, huge farms. 50 such plants with one pipeline into the fjord. That's a real problem. So the semi-closed systems releasing water without salmon lice into the environment is okay for the salmon lice problem. But we have another big problem with organic matter and nutrients building up when these new land-based things are coming.
So that's an area that needs incentives and innovation and investment to actually address the technology.
And we have these drum filters that we made 100 microns light opening, take care of the sludge from these things. But it's the sludge treatment plant that this sludge having a dry matter content of 0.2%. There's 99.8% water in this sludge from these drum filters. And then we have a treatment plant, sludge treatment, that have the the dry matter content up to 25%, so you can handle it. So you don't need to handle water and transport it away. And the outlet from this sludge treatment goes into the oceans today. Yeah. And you have the waters out here have micrograms of nutrients per liter. And in the circulating systems in recirculating farms, then you have milligrams per liter. And the output from these sludge treatment water have gram per liter. And that is 1 million times more concentration than the natural water.
Fascinating.
Okay. And that is a big future problem.
Thank you. Great. So we're going to go to a different perspective now. A remote participation from Fredrik Myhre, head of the Ocean Department at WWF Norway. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so sorry I'm not able to be there in person in beautiful Rosedal. But hopefully I can provide you with some important words digitally as well. And as you said, Mr. Rivett-Carnac, our planet is in a big, serious climate crisis, but we are also in an equally serious nature crisis. And those two sides are the same, two sides of the same coin, and must be solved at the same time. Everything, every industry and every project and every political decision must include how to contribute to the solutions that these two crises needs as a backbone in what we do. And up until now, the way we have produced food and harvest from the sea has resulted in many fish stocks being overfished and many important habitats being destroyed. And if we look at the numbers from the Food and Agriculture Organization in the UN, we see that 93% of all commercial fish stocks are either overfished or fully exploited already today. In other words, we cannot harvest more from the ocean in the same way that we have done up until now, going forward into the future. We also know that the global aquaculture industry has a big footprint, both when it comes to contributing to climate change, but also to nature loss. And if we are to ensure that harvesting from the ocean happens on nature terms and within the planet's boundaries in the future, we need a couple of things. We need research and innovation, and I mean research that gives us better understanding on both how species to species interactions are and how species to habitat interactions are. In other words, we need to understand how different species affect each other and how they are affected and affect their habitats. And of course, we need research and technology on how we can catch species without these being overfished or habitats being destroyed, and also how aquaculture can be done in a way that doesn't destroy the nature around us. In addition, we need more research and major investment in algae, which in the future will have a much more important place in our diet than we see today. Just as we need to eat more plant-based food from land, algae from the sea must be an important part of our food system in the future. And here is aquaculture can play a key role. And in this, it's absolutely key that the decision makers, meaning our politicians, actually listen to what the scientist says. We cannot allow ourselves to have fishing quotas exceeding scientific advice, fishing methods destroying the habitats, or aquaculture that leaves a large negative footprint to its surroundings. Norway, we often quite wrongly claim to be the world's best ocean nature, but the truth is that we are unfortunately far away from where we need to be when it comes to managing our own waters in a sustainable way. Norway has a lot of knowledge and experience, yes, both when it comes to marine research and development of technology. However, in order to have a sustainable food production from the ocean, we need to see that the political decisions actually follows the recommendations from the people who knows the ocean system best, namely the marine scientists. This goes for both fisheries and aquaculture. It's also absolutely key that we're thinking holistically, much more holistically than before. The fishing industry and the aquaculture industry are just two of many activities along the coastline, inside the fjords or out at sea, and everything we do must be seen in context of each other. Otherwise, we are bound to fail, and we are failing. We have a management plan system in place in Norway, and these plans are a good tool for achieving a sustainable ocean management. However, the plans as they are working today, or should I say not working today, are not enough. We have to develop these plans further from being just a snapshot on how our ocean areas are doing to be more of a tool for true and holistic marine spatial planning. And in that context, I have to mention that one of the most important and effective tools for taking better care of species and habitats, and thereby also the ecosystem functions of the oceans, is to have more and better marine protection. And Norway, as the Ministry of Fisheries said, through the high-level panel of a sustainable ocean economy, has committed ourselves to have a 100% sustainable ocean management by 2025. That's fantastic, but we need to put our money where our mouth is, and we need to start a new and better journey towards a holistic sustainable horizon. Thank you.
That's very, thank you, Fredrik. That's very helpful to hear that different perspective. And I think what it underlines is how complicated some of these issues are, that we have so many different perspectives on them, and one of the peculiarities of our time is smart people can disagree about things and both can be right? And that's the beginning of an interesting dialogue. So I'd like now to turn to Konrad Sekkingstad, who's been around in the industry for a long time, seafood entrepreneur. And I'd like to ask you, what do you think needs to be done to increase production and meet the need for sustainable growth and development?
It's a big question. It's the big question. And what we have seen now during the 40 years I have been in business, together with Eide, we have seen some factors which impact the really thinking of what to do. We have seen farmers comes and go, a lot of bankruptcy. We have seen the people who are really focused on the environment, on the production of healthy food. They have succeeded. They are still there. And that's not for nothing. They have taken it seriously. They have gone into this situation. They have seen that farming salmon in an environment which are not sustainable, is not good. It's not good for the business. It goes together hand in hand. You need to earn money to produce salmon, to do the investments Eide and a lot of other farmers have done. This Salmon Eye is another proof that people who really want to do something seriously with the environment and the total production of salmon, not on behalf of, but together with the nature, they succeed. They have done that for many, many, many years, and they are still around. And you ask how to expand the business. Of course, there is a political side in this. You need the frames in order to grow. You need the frames in order to know what's happening next year. You need the predictability in order to do the investment. And I think the Salmon Eye, we are all agree it's fantastic. It's the direction to go. To open it up for the rest of for the public, for the politicians, for everybody, to show inside what's really going on in a fish farmer's life. This is the way to go, and I think they will succeed many times better than the people who try to hide the problem. Get it to the surface, show it to the people, and then the growth will come.
Fabulous, thank you. And can I just ask you, I mean, what you just said there is a fantastic insight, that actually it is farming with nature, is meeting environmental requirements that leads to a successful business in salmon farming. As someone who's been around in the industry for so long, do you think that perspective is shared by the majority of salmon farmers in Norway? Because often in these industries there is vested interest and we don't want things to change, we want things to be like they were in the past. Does that exist, or do we see a shift in perspective?
We see that among all the farmers.
Yeah.
In a smaller and bigger scale, they are everybody. They have to. It's also down to the politics in the fish farming. If you don't follow the rules, you're not in.
Yeah.
But I see also by the change of generation, we see the new generation coming up. You touched it before. They want other system. They want to be sure that what they are eating is right. So there is a change in mentality among the people who are now running also the businesses. The old guys like myself, we had another view of it 40 years ago because we didn't know. So the new generation and balls to really take like Salmon Eye to a next level, fantastic. That the growth will come.
Great, fantastic, thank you. So I'd love to go to you now, Ruben, and you may have the same perspective, you may have a different perspective, all welcome. So Ruben Oddekalv, I'd love to ask you, from what you've heard here, There is clearly a deep intent to improve Norwegian salmon farming and to make it more sustainable and work within natural limits. What do you think now needs to happen next to really implement this and take us further forward?
First, the first thing that needs to happen is that we need to start doing what we're talking about. It's the easiest thing in the world to make a fancy center talk about good intentions and make good regulations. What we need to do is we need to start doing what we're talking about. So when we talk about sustainable fish farming, we need to do the steps that makes it more sustainable. But there is no such thing as sustainable fish farming of a carnivore fish. But we can do it as good as we can. And the way things are done today, I strongly disagree with the rådgivende biologer who says that there's no problem with the let-outs today. I've been there, I've been diving around, I've been down with submarines. I know that the seafloor underneath the farms are dying. So we need to do some changes. It's fully possible. The solution is more or less on the table, but we need to stop talking about it and start acting. And we have all the tools, we have all the possibilities. It's just starting to do it, and that's what I hope Eide Fjordbruk and Salmon Eye will be like the door opener to.
Great, that's really helpful. I mean, I'd love to just ask you, you said we need to now start, who needs to do what exactly? Who's not doing their job right now that is happening?
First of all, the government needs to follow up. They need to open the door and give, like the fish farmers need help to get the plants, they get the license to operate, and the fish farmers need to do the investment. So first of all, the government and the fish farmers need to talk, and then you need, of course, a lot of technology to make this better. Yeah. But first we need to start by fixing all the farms. We can't talk from today and then speak about growth. Yeah. First we need to fix the environmental impact that we have today, because that's too big. Okay. The footprint in the fjords are too big today, but there are solutions. We just need to start.
Yeah. Great, so we're going to move to a different perspective. Rupert, Chief Executive of the Marine Stewardship Council. You are internationally recognised for your work over many years in the role of MSc that has a global reputation. How do you see the future of sustainable seafood production, and what do we need to see from politicians, the industry and others to achieve sustainable growth when it comes to producing food from the sea?
Tom, thank you. That is such an enormous question. I'd normally like 3 hours.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, look, starting off, on the boat on the way over, we heard Manuel Barrage from the FAO talk about 800 million people every day going to bed hungry. You know, there is a crisis. The world needs more food. So it's an imperative. It's not nice to do. We need to produce more food. As we heard Peter Thompson, the UN Ambassador for the Oceans, say, blue foods are already part of that solution. And the recent Blue Food Assessment reports that were published, I think, talk about a 6-fold increase, potentially from aquatic foods, the bulk of that coming from aquaculture. So I'm one of life's eternal optimists. You have to be if you've been running MSc for nearly 20 years. I do believe humanity is at a crossroads. I do believe we can accelerate and scale sustainable production from the oceans, but it has to be done sustainably. And your question touches on the role of governments and others. We've already had some of those answers. Governments have to set the right enabling environment. They've got to get the incentives right, the grants to help those who are doing the right thing to scale their businesses and produce more sustainable food. Others need to be penalised. And that applies as much in the wild capture space as it does in the aquaculture space. On the wild side, it's a huge issue. I mean, you've touched on this with global climate change. Fish are moving north and south. They're moving into different jurisdictions. So again, back to the role of governments. Governments, and Norway's living this at the moment, they need to sit down and work out allocation mechanisms in an era of global climate change when fish are moving much more across transboundaries to make sure those fish are fished within sustainable limits. And there's a huge issue in the Northeast Atlantic with herring, mackerel and blue whiting, which I would love to discuss, but we won't have time to get into. Industry has a part to play. I think industry needs to be bolder. There are some fantastic initiatives, again, more on the wild side. CBOS, I think, is an excellent initiative that's brought some of the biggest producers of seafood together who've committed to fishing sustainably, eradicating slave and bonded labour. That's great, but whether it's aquaculture or wild, we need industry to be bolder with faster timelines, not to follow fishery improvement projects for years if they're not delivering. And lastly, you wouldn't be surprised to hear Chief Executive of the MSC say that the consumers, we mustn't forget the market and the power of the market. And if Chris Ninnis, Chief Executive of the ASC, was here, he would say exactly the same. Consumers, all of us, our families, have a role to play in demanding, whether it's MSC, ASC is irrelevant, but demanding sustainable, traceable seafood choices. And if you don't get that assurance, don't buy it. So I'm optimistic, but my concluding comment relates to your opening comment. You talked about hope, and if all the commitments under Paris are delivered, we could hit 2.4 degrees as opposed to 7. That sounds great, but I happen to read the IPCC cryosphere report that talks about 1.5 degree warming, i.e. what Paris was aiming for. 90% of warm water reefs have gone. 2 degrees, they've all gone. So 2.4 degrees, we've lost all of our warm water reefs, and some of the impacts on marine ecosystems will be irreversible. So my final comment is, let's all step up, work together, get out of the silos and be more ambitious.
And I completely agree with that last point, obviously. And my point, just to clarify at the beginning, it's not that 2.4 degrees is okay, but that we're moving in the right direction to improve, right? And you're absolutely right, 2.4 degrees is a disaster around the world, including for the oceans. Just very quickly, I'd love to ask you, because you bring a different perspective to this group to many others, given that you focus on wild fisheries. If you sort of look into your crystal ball forward a couple of decades, will the proportion of fish we eat that have shifted even further from wild proportions to farmed? How do you see that future?
I'm not a scientist or an expert on this, but without doubt, the growth is going to come from aquaculture. Yeah. But we have to remember a third of wild stocks are caught and turned into fish meal and fish oil. So that's a third of annual global landings of about 90 million metric tons. And 85% of that fish meal, fish oil goes into aquaculture. So the two are inextricably linked. We can't have sustainable oceans without solving climate, and we can't have sustainable aquaculture without resolving sustainable fisheries globally.
Thank you. Great. So I would love to pass to Øystein Skaala, scientist at the Institute of Marine Research. How could the world and Norway produce more seafood without destroying our oceans and the environment? And what can we learn from your research?
Big questions there.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah.
If you look at the amazing Atlantic salmon, the star of today, actually, it is a top predator. It sits on the top of the food chain, which means that it needs a lot of excellent food. So obviously then, to feed a growing world population, I mean, you can't do that with the top predator, with salmon. Still, I mean, as cold water animals use only a fraction of the energy compared with the warm-blooded animals like cattle, there are very good reasons, in my opinion, to produce and eat salmon as an alternative to cattle. But if we are thinking of the large volumes we need to feed a growing population, then we need to go down in the food chain where the big volumes and the big biomasses are, and look at seaweed and shellfish and so on. I think that's where we need to go. So over to the last part of your question, my own research. Yeah. Well, we have shown that at present about 2/3 of the wild Norwegian salmon populations are genetically affected by gene flow from escaped farm salmon. 1/3 of the population are quite strongly affected. And this has happened only in a few decades. So what does this mean? My team has set up a number of large studies, also conducted under natural environments. And what we've seen is that this gene flow, this introgression, leads to maladaptive changes in the wild populations, and
and reduced survival rates. And of course, that is not a thing that can continue. But this is fortunately then we see now that the numbers of escapees tend to decrease. So we hope that is a long-term trend. But we'll have to see that. And but unfortunately, I mean, this issue with the escape is only one of several environmental issues, and they're all linked to the open sea cages. So, for example, the salmon lice and the use of cleaner fish and so on, effects on non-target wild species around the farms and so on. So there are plenty of things. So, in my opinion, we need to speed up the transition to to new technologies. So I really welcome the initiative from Sondre and his crew to take some brave views here and some brave steps towards new semi-closed technology. I think that's the way to go. And to be more specific, I think because there is a lot of positive thinking now. So in my personal opinion, we have now a sort of a magic situation where several parties want to take a step further. So in my opinion, what we could do now is to set up a joint, decent, large pilot study in dense salmon farming region to test out, to assess all aspects of, for example, semi-closed cages compared to the open cages and the land-based things and these things. So my personal opinion is that we have a very nice opportunity now because parts of the industry seem to be interesting, but we need to set up a joint private and public large-scale study on this.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Thank you. Can I just ask you? I mean, what you did, the point you made about the species type and eating at different places on the food chain. Of course, Salmon Eye is also about how do we get food from the sea writ large, right? Which has been Sondre's vision. What are the barriers to eating further down or up the food chain so that there's less, the types of species that you described? Is it to do with profitability? Is it to do with consumer acceptability? Is it to do with practical issues around farming? Why don't we do that at the moment?
I think we have seen that it's a long way to go to introduce a new species into aquaculture. It takes a lot of work to manage.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons. Another reasons may be, I'm not a specialist in these things,
Okay.
But another reasons might be tradition and culture, what we used to eat, of course.
Yeah.
So we have to get used to these other species in the diet. I think that.
Yeah, great. So I don't know an enormous amount about Norwegian salmon farming, but I do know that we need to have more diverse panels when we talk about salmon farming and have more women on the panel. But you've saved us from not having a dreaded mammal where it's only men. So thank you very much for doing that, Friede. And I'd like to pass to you now, Friede Andersen from the Food Safety Authority. Can new technology be a part of the solution to better fish welfare and assure sustainable growth in the production?
Thank you. And this is a very important question, and the answer is not simple.
Okay.
But I will try to...
We'll give you a bit of extra time because, to say sorry for the mammal. Yeah.
Okay. I will try to pinpoint what I think are important enablers for using technology to obtain better fish welfare. And today in Norway, too many fishes die and are injured during the sea phase. And low welfare and high mortality are not sustainable. And it is a requirement in the Norwegian Animal Welfare Act that new forms of operations, methods, equipment and technical solutions for use on animals should have been tested and found fit for purpose with respect to animal welfare. So that's the law today. And despite of this, too many fishes die. And I think the key to success is knowledge of fish biology and the fish's need. Interdisciplinary competence, risk assessments, laboratory studies, and low-scale testing to eliminate potential negative effects on the fish health and welfare before production in large scale. And all this is a necessity in the process of planning a design, development, and further through the production chain until the fish is slaughtered. And another important topic to be considered is whether requirements regarding fish welfare should be implemented in the technical regulation. In that way, the developer and of technology and the vendors will be earlier aware of the importance of fish health and fish welfare. And hopefully this can prevent that significant efforts and money are invested in technology that turns out not to be suitable in terms of fish welfare. Standardization and certification of equipment regarding fish welfare can also be useful measure and need to be further discussed. So if we succeed to reduce the number of fish that dies and are injured during production, I think we have taken a long step in the direction of more sustainable production, and with that opportunities to achieve sustainable growth in the production in Norway.
And presumably there's a clear business case for doing that as well, right? Mortality is not good for business as well, I'm sure. Is that the case? Yeah. So what's prevented that type of investment happening to now?
I think a regulation that stimulates to take care of the fish.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's a simple answer.
That's what's needed, right? Okay, yes. Yeah. Okay, great. We'd love to hear from you in a minute about that too. So Kenneth, can I pass to you, please? Kenneth Bruvik, how can we move forward with fish farming and harvesting from the oceans while at the same time assuring the preservation of wild salmon and other parts of biology of the ocean? We've heard a bit about this already.
First of all, the ocean and the fjords needs love. And I think that this Salmon Eye maybe could provide love for the fjords and a better understanding. And that fact that we are sitting around this table and discuss this is very important, because then we can find solutions, first of all. The salmon have no voice. I will try to help it a little bit. The salmon is the Norwegian lion. And we have an international responsibility to preserve it. But the last 30, 40 years, we have lost 50% of the stocks. And we have lost it bit by bit. And when you lose it bit by bit, it's not so easy to have this big red light. So I think that the solution is very simple. And we have many of the solutions right in front of us now. And that have Sondre shown us also, and some other companies. Because with the production we have today, we lose too much materials. And that is very important, because there is not much materials on this planet. Again, now we are in short of materials. And we need to close the open net pens to stop the sea lice, stop the disease, stop the escaping and the genetic threaten. But we also need, in a circular economic perspective, we need to be sure that we can take all these materials back in the production and use them again and again and again. And I think that what we see now is the future. The future is to close it, but we have to do it safely. But we have to have the government with us. They have to, like there have been said before, we need good rules and rules that can make this happen. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. I love what you said there about the red light flashing and how do you realise the emergency that you're going through in slow motion, which is a microcosm of the issue that we're all facing, right? You get used to that emergency unfolding and you have to come back and be present to it. So thank you. Sondre, the innovator, this is your day in many ways. This has been years in the making. You just gave a beautiful speech on the roof of Salmon Eye. We're sitting in this amazing place thanks to your vision as an entrepreneur in your own right and as a tribute to your father. And you said some wonderful things about his courage and his commitment that led you to become the man you are and do these amazing things. I'd like to start off by asking you, you are clearly a front runner in sustainable fish farming. How do you now think new technology can help us reach the need for more food production while we preserve oceans and nature?
I think it's pretty clear that the solutions are in the ocean, but I think also it's pretty clear that if we're going to scale up and produce the volume we need to do it sustainable. So I think that technology can help us to produce more food with taking away those challenges. So the first thing is then to know what is the challenges. And when we know what are the challenges, I know that we are too many people that are smart, even in Norway, or if you think about the world, it's incredible. So I think that if you have the challenges and you have the people and the competency, then you need also like to have the incentives. So you need to have the triangular. So the technology, the people, and incentives. Then you will solve then you can produce more food, and it's gonna also be sustainable. Yeah.
And I've heard about your technology, Water Moon. Can you dive into that a little bit? Because I think that's part of your strategy for the future, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think like Water Moon is for us. We started like in Hålandsdalen, which is not many people. We started our own tech company, so it's called Eide Sustainable Marine Technology. And we were looking at like these challenges. We were talking about sea lice, talking about escapes, talking about how can we create like value from the sludge, like the feces from the salmon, and take it out. That was pretty much the scope. And then what we did was that we created Water Moon. It's a platform where we want to create biology in a way that we are taking care of the environment and maybe even bring positive back by having the circular economy. But what we always was thinking that the quality of the fish should never be lower, it should be higher. So that was always in the back. How can we fix the challenges but increase the quality?
And what would you need to enable you to take that to further scale now?
I think that what we need is a good system. I know that on the west coast of Norway we have a lot of issues like we have been through today. But I know also that there's a lot of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of fairness in the communities. And I know that if we are present a system to fix these challenges and incentives, we will do. Because together we are strong and the communities are backing us. Yeah. So I think that is what we need is like, we try to say, I know you also, Bjørnar, like this, like sea and land hand in hand, we say. And that's a good quote because it's like, if we have the right goal, we will be able to fix everything. And that's also regarding the challenges. But it's difficult to then scope out those challenges, of course, sometimes. But if we can find those challenges, I know we can solve them every day.
The right goal, and I think what you've done here is you've created a very clear visual impression of coming together and collaborating and finding solutions. So I'm going to ask in a minute, we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm going to ask everybody to close out by telling us after today, what would it take for this to be a moment of departure, for the future to be different from the past, for this to be a real moment of breakthrough? Just before I do, I would love to invite the Minister. You've come here, you've listened to this conversation. You have responsibility and Director of Fisheries as well for what's happening in Norway. I'd love to just invite you to comment again, having heard this, about how we can move forward in a sustainable way.
I'm sure that aquaculture will be a bigger part of the future than it is today. both in Norway and also in the world. It's a way in the same. It's in the same way as we some 100 years ago went from hunters and and catchers to farmers.
Right.
Because the population was so big, we had to produce food more effectively. We have to do the same in the ocean, and the ocean is 70% of the earth when it comes to the top of the world. And I'm a farmer. I know we're working like this.
That's how much.
5 centimeters, 10 centimeters down in the ocean, we can work much deeper. So of course the ocean will be take a bigger place in the solution to feed the world population. I'm really sure, and it's very interesting to hear all this perspective, because we both have to build the aquaculture bigger, more sustainable in more than one way. Both when it comes to climate, when it comes to pollution, when it comes to the footprint at the wild salmon, and both when it comes to the sea lice and when it comes to the escape. So here's a lot of job to do, and I think also it's just like the pandemic, and it's like when we are fighting the climate change. One country can't do this alone. We have to cooperate and collaborate, so people around the world can learn from both Norway and other countries who has a long history of aquaculture. You know, when you go to Asia, there are some countries that are much bigger than Norway when it comes to this. So we have to teach each other, and we have to develop. But I'm sure that the Norwegian model, where we put stronger regulations, we make different kinds of how the industry will earn more money to, if they do it the right way.
Sustainability is more profitable. That's what it has to get.
And I'm sure that also the markets will demand this stronger and stronger in years to come. So we should work with the Norwegian model. We should develop it, refine it, and that's what we are doing. A shift of government maybe make a different kind of speed, but we are moving in the same direction. Maybe we are not moving fast enough, but I'm sure that the position that our government has, that we say we will be technology neutral, it's the right way to work, because if we should decide it's this technology or it's this technology, the innovation will stop.
Right.
Think in the year of 1900, if the government should decide that the next 30 or 40 years we should have wagons with 10 horses or 20 horses or 100 horses, and a few years later the car was there. So we need to develop technology, and I think that the companies, the industry, the research and development, and also the universities, they have a key role in this, and they work. We have to work together, all parts of it, like Frank spoke about earlier. So we push this forward, and we also have to think circular economy. That means that what today comes out of the cages has to be a part of the co-production. But that doesn't mean that the only solution for doing that is to have closed cages. There is another issue that we have to think about, and that is that we have to be energy efficient in everything we're doing. Clean energy will be something we have to hunt for in the future, and that's why we have to be energy efficient in everything we do.
Thank you, Minister. That's great, and I certainly agree. You know, this is unfolding. The question is how do we make this our legacy? That we're the ones that push this forward and make a big jump. So I'm going to go around in just a minute. Would you like to comment?
Well, yes. short comment just because a lot is said. I think one of the next indicators of sustainability would be fish welfare, as mentioned, and I think we the authority we need to work out some indicators, but I think also we can't we need to listen to the market and the customers. So the salmon will die in the end. Don't understand me right.
Yeah.
But the customers would claim that it should have as good as life as possible in the way, and they will state this whether it's a wild caught cod or a farmed salmon. I think this will be one of the next huge questions, and we will manage.
Thank you.
Can I ask Sebastian, do we have time for everyone to say one sentence about what it needs to happen now?
I think we have to leave, but...
We have to? All right. We'll be quick. Okay, so literally it's one sentence. We're going to start with Fredrik on the screen and then come around to him this way. What needs to happen to make this day a departure point where the future accelerates our journey towards sustainability in a much faster way than we've been used to? Fredrik, one.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be short. For the aquaculture industry, we need to have, or for any industry, we need to have a political framework that's good enough. According to when we set sustainability as the level, and in that we need to have a common set of rules. Nobody can escape those rules, and we need to have an implementation period. And in addition to that, we need to have a finance to actually do the changes that's needed. And in that, we have to link the aquaculture industry or the fishing industry or whatever we do in the oceans to the biodiversity framework that's coming finally in Montreal now in December. And as a challenge for the government for Minister Skjæran is to make sure that the Norwegian ambition for that biodiversity framework, the New Deal for Nature, is ambitious enough. And of course, that Norway, after December, takes this home and making an implementation plan that actually will fulfill the commitments done in the biodiversity framework. And just to mention, last time we did this in 2010 after the Aichi targets in CBD, then Norway actually spent 6 years making this implementation plan, and we didn't reach a single of the targets that was set after 10 years. So we have a long way to go also in Norway, and we need to move faster, and we need to make sure that we have a common set of rules for the different industries that actually will solve both the climate crisis and the nature crisis that we are in the middle of.
Fredrik has just generously demonstrated what we're not going to do in the next few minutes, okay? So it was all very good, but you mustn't do that. Otherwise, you don't know what you're sort of be. Short is more. So just a sentence. What's needed now? Yeah.
We need to stop talking and start doing.
Thank you.
Simple as that. The technology is there, and we can't say that we should be technology neutral because there's just one answer that solves all the problems, and it's closed.
This is the environmental corner. We have to close it in the sea, not on shore.
Definitely.
In the sea. And we push water. It's not so much power you need to push water. And we need to catch the phosphor. We can't lose it. And we need resources back.
Thank you.
We need to explore new technologies, and I would like to see more of what we call the low-hanging fruits, not the fantastic, fabulous things, but the low-hanging fruits, like, for example, semi-closed cages, to assess all sides of it in a joint private-public pilot study.
Thank you.
It's all sad, but it's all sad what should be said, but I have written you have to detect the problem in order to have the growth, detect it, set plan, and do it. Do it. It's just, we know the problems.
You have to use technology that not releases salmon lice. And you have to take care of the phosphorus in the sludge, because phosphorus is a limited resource that we will run short of in a few decades on the Earth.
Sentence?
I think I've said
You've said,
Okay.
Yeah, so I think at least one thing that is really important is to make sure that we have the same kind of picture of the situation. And although it seems like we are quite agreeable here, I think this place could be a place where we could actually be very precise on what is the challenge and what are the next steps.
Yeah. I'll take it up a level, just say we have Agenda 2030, that is humanity's best last chance, our route map to a more sustainable and equitable society. The clock is ticking. So I re-echo what I've said already, which is everybody needs to be bolder, more ambitious, not in silos, partnership, cooperation. Governments must set the incentives in the enabling environment, and we must all hold each other to account.
Knowledge and a regulation that stimulates to sustainable production.
Thank you. Sondre, that's what you.
We need to let the seafood production, as with the least impact, win in terms of how we're gonna grow in the future, to keep up the leadership, because we are in the lead, but Canada, other countries are pushing us in the back. And I know because I'm doing sport, and it's a hell of a job if you're gonna be in front and then you're gonna gain distance from the other ones. It's much easier for coming from the back. So we need to keep up even if you're leading.
Fabulous. Thank you all so much. That's been a fantastic conversation. I'd like to hand over to Sebastian to close us out.
Yeah. I just want to thank all the participants for both informative and important contributions. It's very nice to hear both industry, the regulatory side, the NGOs, and basically what I feel everyone can agree on as some general guidelines on how we're going to work towards a better solution for farming our oceans. So I said earlier today that Salmon Eye will be a platform that will inspire and inform the world on how to better feed the planet. And I really feel that we did a good job to kickstart that. And I hope this is just the very first beginning of what would be a great next chapter in the history of Norwegian seafood production. So with that, I wish everyone a very good rest of the day, and thank you for all the participants. Hope to see you again soon, and goodbye.